Hi, welcome to Building SaaS with Python and Django. My name's Matt Lehman, and we work on Django apps on the stream. We're going to continue on the homeschool application that I'm building tonight. We're going to work on merging a couple pages together. I've got a limited amount of time this evening, so we're going to get right into it and check out what to do. I've been working on taking a couple of pages that were very similar and combining them. So we're going to get into that. Hopefully that'll be interesting to you. I hope you'll stick around if it is. But before I do that, I want to just say thank you to my patrons. You can support me on patreon.com/mblehman if you're interested. But I want to thank Rupert, Andrew, Patrick, Eric, Philip, and Miguel for supporting me. You help make it possible for me to do podcasting and much other stuff. So if you like what you see and you want to support me financially, you can go check out that site and see what I'm doing. Let's look at this issue. So last week I was working on this two different pages. I have a course page and a student's version of the course page to see how much they've done on this homeschool app that I'm building. And I should note that you can ask me anything about Python, Django, or web development. That's what I'm here for. But I'm giving you context of what I'm building today. So the features of this particular page, I've combined some of them and put that behind a feature flag. That was the big thing that I was showing off last week, because my customer is not necessarily certain that she wants that to be available or not until it's all ready. And so I set that up so that it was behind a feature flag so that she could check it out, but I could wait until the rest of it was ready for before sharing it to the larger group of users. And there's a bunch of things that she highlighted that said, like, actually, this actually really needs to be there. This was important for stuff. And so we need to get these things back in there. So I'm going to continue on that path and start checking through them and find the important ones. And then we'll see how far we get in the time that I've got allotted tonight. The first one that I want to accomplish is trying to differentiate between tasks that are completed by a student versus tasks that are not. So let's get up and look at some code area. I've got some other notes from other research that I'm doing for this project, but that's not where we need to be. We need to be looking at the course views. And we need to look at the particular, this is the course detail view that we've been modifying. So that's up here. Much of this didn't change. We were putting the extra data behind this combined course flag. So all of the data is going to go behind this. And we can compare some of the features that were required, and I'm going to bring up the web server so you can see what it is that she has commented on needing as a priority before that we can fully replace the other thing. Because there were some features from one page that I just haven't implemented and put into the other one, because I thought they might be unneeded, but I turned out to be wrong. So let's take a look here. And I do also recall that this is the cutoff for when I have some sample data, but the sample data, like the school year ended at the end of April, and I have some max limits in my school year, so all of my rich set of sample data is now gone, and so we're on to the next school year. So that's, I guess, exciting, and that the app has been long enough that my test data is no longer applicable, but it does mean that we have a limited set of stuff here. That's probably okay, because we can add more as we need them. So what I'm showing you right now, this is the combined view. Previously, without this flag, the course page, which is what we're looking at, you can see from the URL, it's got the course and it's got a hash ID showing the actual course to look up, had the list of tasks and these controls to move tasks up and down and to add new ones and delete them, but it didn't have this extra column at the end. The extra column is showing an enrolled student. So if a student is enrolled in third grade, as represented here, then they are going to show up as this extra column of data. And that's where we need to do more stuff. And I probably need to populate this list with a few more tasks before this is really going to be representative of the thing that we're trying to do. So let's do that first before we get into it. So let's create a task. We'll just call it demo, and we'll make it these not graded tasks, and we'll replicate this. We'll do it I don't know, let's do it 5 times. And actually, let's just number these so that we have something to compare. So those are replication features that I added recently. That was fun to do. I did stream on some of that stuff a while ago, but not all of it. So now we've got more data to look at here. And the first thing that my customer, who by the way is my spouse, this is primarily for my family to start, but I do have some actual customers outside of my family, and I want to make the best tool that I can for all of them. So that's the goal here. So we now have a set of tasks to work with, but we need to be able to differentiate between the tasks that are complete and the tasks that are incomplete. So I'm going to actually go ahead and mark a particular task. We'll set it for today's date, which is the 5th of May 2021, and set that. So happy Cinco de Mayo out there for those of you that celebrate that. And so now you can see that we have this date set. So this is now a completed task for this student. And we want to be able to show that this task right here is visually distinct from the rest of the tasks. That's an important attribute that is missing right now and was available in the old version of this. In fact, we can go to the area where it has flags, and let's go ahead and disable this page for this flag for a minute and see what it looks like with the old view, which should take, so that's turned to false, and then we can refresh this page and we get this view where, like, this is what it used to look like, and what it still does look like for the majority of my customers, except for my spouse, who is trialing out this new view. And so when looking at the actual school year and digging into this, this is the page right here that I'm trying to replace. And you can see there's what happened to that first task. Well, one of the features that I have to restore that's really important is she wants to be able to when a school year has started and she has students who have the stuff to do, when the task is done, that's no longer the priority. She still wants to be able to access it, which is why it has this show completed tasks button. But this is where we can start to get the hint of the thing that we need to implement first. And that thing is a visual distinction of this item is done. Let's mark it as a grayed out version so that we know that it's done. So that's what we're going for on this page that is this new version. And so I'm going to turn the flag on. Now you have a baseline for the understanding of what it is I'm trying to replicate. And I'm not trying to do the filtering part yet, so this button to hide and unhide task is not the thing. She's okay if this combined page starts with just this visual distinction between light and dark. So we'll refresh this page, and now we've got the updated version back. So this problem gets slightly complicated though, and it gets slightly complicated because multiple students can be in a single course. So there are two ways that this can happen. One way is that you can have multiple students in a single grade level. It's also possible to have multiple grade levels that contain the same course. So those are the conditions that can make it so that there's actually two columns here. So we might actually, in order to do this properly, let's take this Math 3 class, and we're going to break this example. It's not really going to be Math 3 anymore, but we're going to add enough for another student here. So let's go to the school year. And right now I only have 3rd grade, and I've got one of the 2 students in this sample set added. So we'll add a 2nd grade level, and we'll call this 1st grade. And then, so now we've got 1st grade and 3rd grade. And I want to add a course. Actually, I don't want to add a course. I want to go to the existing course. I want to go to Math 3. And we're going to edit the course. and make it so that this actually applies to both. And just to make the naming clearer, we'll call it math both to indicate that it's actually for 2 students or 2 grade levels. So the effect is now you can see on this page, we have 3rd grade and 1st grade. And for whatever reason, the flag is not showing, so I don't know what's going on there. There we go. There's some like caching that happens with Django Waffle that is the flag library that I'm using that kind of keeps on in that state for a little while. So anyway, we're back to this now, but we still don't have more students here, but I did make that possible to work last time. So we need to return back to to that school year, and you can see there's no student enrolled. So we need to enroll a student and specify one of the other students. So I'm going to pick this one, and I'm going to pick 1st grade. So now we've got a 2nd student, Faye, enrolled in 1st grade. And you can see that math both shows up for both 3rd grade and 1st grade. So now we've set up a scenario where 2 students are enrolled in the same course. And if we click on this, we finally get the real representative scenario that I'm hoping to describe. In fact, there's one more set of state in order to capture this that I think is that we want to get. So I'm going to mark that this is also complete, and we'll mark that as 5/5/21, and that flag is not applying. That's kind of annoying. Come on now. I don't know if it's something to do with SQLite or what. I have no idea. Like some of the stuff, caching stuff is weird. And I'm going to mark a second one. So this is really applies to n levels for where n is the number of students, but there's kind of 2 states that I need to capture of when do I need to show that this task is totally complete versus when do I need to show it as incomplete. And that's going to matter a lot, especially when I go back and add that filtering. So if the filtering is don't show the completed tasks by default and instead hide that stuff, then I really want to make sure that that all the students have completed it. So that's going to be the rules for this. So in this scheme that we're talking about, because both Mark and Faye have completed this first task of year, this line should show up as gray. Because Mark has completed demo 1 and Faye has not, this should show up in its normal coloring. So that's where we're at. That's the data that we need to introduce. And so there's some additional state that does not exist in the context data that is there today that we need to add as we're processing the list so that we can determine whether to show this as gray or not. So I think the first step to do is go into the context data and add that extra. It's essentially Boolean state. And that Boolean state is calculated from the summation of have you done this or not? Have all of the students done this? So that's where we have to go into the view and do that computation. So we've got this shared function here. And the reason it's a shared function is because there's actually multiple views that need this context. One of them is dynamic. So what I haven't even pointed out is that you can do certain actions like delete one of these things, and the JavaScript library will do the call to post to delete the particular page and re-render the entire table of data. And it has to re-render that whole table of data because these things are numbered. If I did not, if I just deleted that row, then you'd suddenly, like let's say I deleted demo 2, then task 3 is going to go away and the number sequence would be 1, 2, 4. And that doesn't make sense. I mean, I guess it could, but it's not the best experience. So we need to re-render the whole table of data. So that is why this context function exists. So we're going to spend our time actually working down here in this context function. Hopefully that makes sense to you. If you have any questions, drop them in the chat. I'm happy to answer them. All right. So we're going through and we're essentially at the moment calculating for each task, we're going through and saying each student has some state. But we don't care about this particular student dictionary because we need something that applies to the whole row. So we need to add some context that is to this entire task. And I think I want to give it some kind of semantic meaning that is appropriate here. So we can say, what can we say? We can say, what name do I want to call this? I'm trying to think of how to do this because we don't know until we get to the bottom, until we've looped through all of the students of what this task state is, right? So it's really a loop that looks something like this. So I'm going to say something simplified of task complete. And it's only complete if all of them are complete. So we can actually default it. So if we default it to true, is that going to do what we want to do? That's the question I want to start with asking. Because you need to, it's like, we want to be able to update the state for each iteration through the student loop. And I'm trying to figure out if that's going to be the most logical. I think it's not. I think the behavior that we want to make sure that it shows up as incomplete most of the time. Oh, welcome. Glad you're able to join in during your lunch break. So you must be at some time far in the future or the past. I'm not actually sure where you're coming from. Like lunch is a long time ago for me, but you could be referring to tomorrow's lunch, May the 6th. Curious how time zones work. So I think I want to actually default to future. Yeah, New Zealand. Well, welcome to you from the US, I guess. So we want to set it to the task to be shown by default. So we want the default state to be incomplete because there's also a state here that the number of students may be 0. So that's something we have to account for. So this for loop may actually never kick in. And if we're making the display logic for the template show the darker version of the text only when the task is incomplete, then we want to actually have this Boolean state be false by default. I mean, conversely, I could say like task incomplete and that be true, but my brain blows up if I try and think like that. So we're going to call it complete or not, because thinking about the negative logic is really too challenging for me anyway. Maybe you're a rock star at it, but that's not how I work. So we can say, how do we update this? How do we know when to switch it to true? That's the interesting challenge, especially if we're doing this as an iteration. We don't really know until the end, right? We don't know until we've processed all of the students. So it's not like I can go in here and say, if one student saw this and had the work done, then you mark it as true, because that's not good enough. So it's almost like we have to keep track of, I'm going to do this in maybe a stupid way, but it will hopefully work in the end. And in fact, I don't think we'll actually need that local variable. So we'll say, if we say complete statuses is a list, we might not even need this. We might just be able to calculate this from the student details at the end. Still thinking through this. Sorry, I apologize. I have not thought this all the way through. This is just the process of my brain process. So we need to essentially, the thing that we're looking for is the coursework is the piece of data that we need to determine if this is done or not. So if all of the students have coursework, then the task is complete. And so there's going to be a list of student details right here. That's what we've been populating. It's actually in this task detail. You can see this list. And so if we can look into that, inspect it after the student loop has been processed, then we can determine if that task is complete. So there's actually two factors that come into this, but we'll do the naive version first, and then we'll work through the corner case. And I'll actually make a to-do to what about no students? Again, to make sure that we account for that case where there's no students, because that is an edge case. So the thing that we're trying to take is we can determine task details, and it's going to be all. So there's a built-in in Python called all, which takes an iterable, and the iterable is in this case going to be, we can do a generator, and we can say student detail of coursework. Let's use a shorter name. For detail coursework, for detail in task detail student details. Okay. That may have made 0 sense to you. I hope I strung it together okay. But the idea is here, like, all of these have to be true. So the dictionary will have a value here. And you can see that ignoring like how this is built, there is some collection of data that is a lookup table that looks for a task ID to see if there's coursework in there. The reason that's done is for performance reasons, so you don't have to fret too much about that. But you can understand this as the dictionary will either have a coursework object or not. And so if we actually come over to the interpreter, and I've got my list, and I'm saying my list is none and none, because if you call get on a dictionary and it doesn't have a value, it will return none. If I did all on the list, that's going to return false, right? Because none of them are true. Even if I had a new definition of the list, and let's just pretend that this string coursework represents a coursework object. It doesn't really matter. But if we do this all again, it's still going to be false. But now if we have both of them as some value, something that is truthy, then we've now got a list, and all should return true. So that's the case we're trying to go for. So we can represent that I don't actually, oops, I see the mistake already. So we want to say, we'll just call this complete at this stage. This is the Boolean state that we're trying to calculate. Is the task complete or not? Okay, so that's kind of step one. What is it complaining about? No overload variant of set item of list. So task detail, student details is a list for, why is that wrong? What I'm trying to do is like a comprehension. How about any? Yeah, that's probably the inverse of this, right? If that's probably better. Ship data love. You're right. It's probably simpler. If any of them are not done, then the task is not complete. So maybe I'm overthinking this. You know, sometimes it is 9:33 p.m. my time, and sometimes my brain is not super fresh after a day of work. So what if we default. Oh, this is coming together way nicer. Thank you all. So let's default it to complete. And check this out. If we go through the students and any of them don't have it complete, then we can flip it over to false. And I think that is going to be way simpler than calculating it later. And it's also going to have the benefit of, well, no, it's not going to have that benefit. So here's what, So complete is actually going to be, do we have, if there are no students, right? Remember I said I have that edge case. If there are no students, we want to show this. So we want this to be false when there are no students, right? So that is literally the bool of the list of students. I think that's right. So now it'll say, if you have any students, then default to true. Because a list with a size of some size will be truthy. If you're an empty list, default to false. So show it as not complete. And then we can come in here and if the, so we want to now flip over to the complete Boolean status based on the value of coursework. So I'm actually going to extract this into a local variable because we'll use it multiple times here, I think. And we'll call it work. Because I am running out of, unfortunately, coursework is a really crummy name for pluralization purposes. And that's just the way it is. Oh my word, come on now. Student, I was trying to copy and I failed. Get task ID. So we've got this, we can change this to assignment to be this local variable. And now before we leave this loop iteration, we'll do one final test here that says, if there's not work, right, then we want to flip it over to be false, right? We want the thing to be incomplete. So we say complete and change that to false. Oh man, that feels so much better than the thing I was trying to do a second ago. I think it's the right logic. We can walk through it mentally, but so no students, this is going to default to false. It's going to skip the for loop, so this will never go, and it will come out false. And then when we render it on the template side, we only use the gray when complete is true. So it'll show it in that darker, whatever darker color we want to show. Okay, now we've got one student. So bool is, the state is true by default. We'll go through the for loop one time. If the student hasn't done it, it flips over to false. And then we render it as darkened, right, as we would want it. I think this definitely extends to multiple students. So if any of them have, so we default to true to say that it's all complete, but if any of them haven't done it, it's no longer complete. So I think that's the right logic. It feels pretty good. It feels nice and clean too. So I appreciate the suggestion about any. That was a good call. All right, let's try it out. So we need to actually use the state now in the template, right? And then we need to actually probably write some test cases. So the template, we're going to go to the course detail page. Where is that page? Course detail. There it is. And we are only going to put it in this combined course flag area. So I've got, as you saw, maybe if you started at the beginning, I was able to flip the flag over or not. So show either the old view or the new view. which means I have a ton of duplicate template logic right in here right now. But that's okay, because when I'm done and I'm ready to roll out the feature, I'll come back through and clean up the flag and just delete all the old duplicated code. So I'm okay with that duplication. It just means that we need to make sure we put it in the right place right now. So we've got the flag as combined area, which is right here. And now we're in the spot where we need to affect the rendering of the font color and all that stuff. And I also didn't think to check. Oh, that was dumb of me. Well, we'll just play with. I don't remember which gray it needs to be, but we can mess with that. What gray is that? I'm curious. That's a gray 600 on that hover, which might be. It needs to be distinct enough to be noticeable, but not so washed out that it's unreadable, because she is. And my customer, and any other customer is still going to need to be able to view the completed stuff. So we don't want to completely like wash it out. So I think we probably, is that visually distinct enough? I don't know. I've got flux on, so it's hard for me to tell, which maybe is a sign that it's not distinct enough. But if I had a list in that gray and this number was in that gray, I don't know, maybe. What is this gray? Maybe that's really the color I want. So that hover gray is 600. So that's the darker one. So I think I want it one shade lighter, which is the 500 gray. So we're going to try with that. See if that'll work. Okay, so where do we need to go? We need to come into the place where this stuff is numbered and the description. And that's not in the resources area. Oh, it's in a totally different template. That's why I'm getting like, where is this stuff? So we have this is just the header, which is not the stuff we're trying to change. Because there's this like JavaScript rendering stuff, I had to separate the template because that needs to be rendered in a separate view. So we actually need to go somewhere else. So course tasks is the template that we really are looking to modify. And here we are again. Here's the flag. So it's in this section. So we've got the counter. And maybe this is a simple, I bet we can apply this to the whole row. Let's try that. So we've got task detail, and we're going to add it. Let's see if we can get away with this. I don't know if it's going to work or not. So if task detail, and this is where templates are nice in Django, in that this is a dictionary, right? We saw that in the view context, but I can access it with attribute access, and that works. So if task detail complete is the thing we want to check, and then we'll say put an end if here, because I think that's all we require. And do we want the complete or not complete? So if it's complete, we want it to be the color that it is right now. Or I'm sorry, I said that backwards. If it is incomplete, we want it to be the color that it is right now. So that darker, the standard black color. If it is complete, then we want it to be in the gray color. So I think this is the one we want. We want to say text gray, and we'll do 500. Oops, I stopped the server. Okay. Oh, snap. Didn't seem to work. All right, let's figure out what we messed up. I'm going to turn on Django Debug Toolbar, which I have configured to turn on with an environment variable. And we're going to refresh, and we're going to check out the context and see what I messed up. I want to check two things. I want to check is the context right, and then the logic. Did I mess up the logic? So we're going to get in here, and we've got our list of details. And complete is true. Oh, yeah, this is a fantastic tool. It's called the Django Debug Toolbar. Now, it's harder to use when you're working with, like, if you have just an API and a JavaScript app. You can do it with some stuff if you're using like Django REST framework, but on a server rendered page, what this does is it gives you this little toolbar. It injects some JavaScript, and you don't want to run this on your production website, your like live website, but it is fantastically useful if you're doing development. You can use this to see what's in your template, which is what I was just looking at. This is also super useful of seeing here are all the SQL queries that ran for this page. So if you have any problems with your queries, like you're querying something in a loop and doing that very slowly, that will show up here. There's a ton of stuff in here. So yeah, definitely it's a good solid plug for the Django debug toolbar. Okay, so we've got this is marked as true, and the rest of these are false. So that's actually the condition that we want. So it seems that I maybe messed up. Yeah, no problem. It seems that I've messed something up here, or it could be that the template syntax is perfectly fine and there's more specificity. That's what it is. There's more specificity applied at the individual line, so it's overwriting that chunk of template syntax is my bet. So if we go in and actually do the inspection on the row, yep, look at, there it is. Oh, I typoed it. Oh, crap. How embarrassing. Text. Refresh. Hey, cool. And you can see it still has, this is still good because look, we're actually on either side of that text 600, gray 600. So this text must be like either 700 or 800 is the default, or maybe it's just black. What is that? I know I must just have the default text color. All right, which is, I think, a black. I'm looking for any specific color information. Yeah, so it must just be black. So we've got, when we are hovering over these, we can see that they're still looking lighter. At the same time, we've gone light enough that when we hover over it, it goes darker. So we can still observe that this is clickable. So that's really positive. And just to prove out that this works, let's go set a date manually for this task. We'll set it to 5/6/21. And now we should have 2 of them that are grayed out. Awesome. Oh, that's exciting. Okay, next thing to do is write a little bit of test code. This is a bit of context that is like the data contract. It's the contract between what the Django view says it's going to provide and what the template on the other side expects to exist. So I want to write the code because I'm not doing some end-to-end test that says, is this text gray? Because that would be super flaky. But I can write the checks that says, when multiple students have completed this, show this as complete. That's context tests that we definitely can write. So I think we should, because I'm the only maintainer of this application, and if I goof it up, then I want a safety net. So we'll go to the test views. That's not the right area. Courses, test views. There we go. We're on the course detail view, and we probably need to set up this particular test state. Sorry about that. Because it's a little bit more complex. And oh, the other thing we should do, remember there's another state where a student is not enrolled. So we want to check, we want the test where there's no enrolled students. We want the test where no students have completed anything. So it defaults to showing as truthy as well. And we want a test where at least one has not completed it. I think that will cover the cases that will trigger the proper Boolean states. It covers, yeah. All right, so what did I just say? We said test task complete no students. When there are no students, a task defaults to incomplete. So that's one test. There's another test where we want to default, so task complete one student coursework. When a student has not completed, the task is marked incomplete. And then finally, the one other test that I said was what happens when they're both done. So task complete, both students done. I don't know that these are the best test names or not, but they're descriptive enough for me. When all students are done with a task, it is marked complete. So these are largely going to be very similar tests in the kind of data that they have. The other bits that we need for all of them is these are only going to be true when this feature flag is on. So we need to attach this decorator to all three tests right now. And this is something that I'll clean up after this is all over. So I'm going to start, perhaps foolishly, from right here. We'll take all of this data for the test as our baseline because it's got a lot of the necessary setup that has to go on this particular view. You have to have a grade level, you have to have a course, you have to have a task, you have to have some student enrolled and coursework. We don't need a grade in this particular test. And in fact, this is the one that doesn't have students, so we can take out the enrollment. The enrollment is what connects a student to the school year. And so if you don't have an enrollment, it's the scenario where you have no students. So we want, this is the scenario. There is going to be a task here. I'm going to run this test and show that it will fail. Whoops, I'm referring to stuff. I'm failing for a bunch of reasons. So actually, maybe she'll go ahead and just write it so we'll get closer to passing anyway. So we're expecting the context to have these task details in it, but it's still going to fail because there's this new thing that I added, which that didn't show. So let's try this again. Test nearest with some verbosity here, which should show the whole dictionary, I think. All right, so the thing that it's highlighting is we're missing the complete is in that dictionary, right? And it's false right now, which is what we actually care about. So really what we want to do is I'm going to, instead of asserting on the whole structure, I'm going to pull out from the task detail. I expect there to be a single item in here. And if there's not, it should fail for other reasons. So I'm just going to just pull from the index because I think that's the right thing to do. And then we want to assert that detail complete, and actually that's a Boolean, so we want to assert that it's false. So assert not complete. And now we don't need this anymore. And the test passes. Cool. So this is similar. This is the basic structure for this, these other tests. So we want this to be incomplete for this particular test when there are multiple students. So we need to come back up here and we're going to take the enrollment and the work and we're going to plop that right here. And so we'll say, we'll do 2 enrollments because that'll represent 2 separate students. I think this should be the right way to do it. And so now there's 2 enrollments means 2 students. One of them has completed the work, but one of them hasn't. So that's what this first enrollment is. So this should still be false. I think this test will actually pass in theory. Forgot, we still need that name. And we're not using the work itself. Cool. That test passed. So that's the state. Hopefully that made sense to you. If it didn't, give me a holler in the chat. One more test. So this test is when both of them are done. So now we want to actually assert the opposite. We want the task to show up as complete, which means we need the coursework for both of them to be done. So this is where we actually have to give more precise names here. So I'm going to say enrollment 1 and enrollment 2. And here we need to come into and define them uniquely. So we'll do enrollment 2 and then enrollment 1. We have to wire those things together more appropriately that way. So now what the scenarios that we've concocted is that there's the student coursework is like, have you done the task or not? And so we're saying the student has done the task. We've made the factory data, so there's a model. Oh, thanks for showing up, Shivan93. I appreciate you turning in. And we are now at this point where both of them are done. So this task should be marked as complete logically. With any luck, we got it right. All right, neat. And I think that actually covers I have some requirements on my project so that all lines of code are covered. So if we didn't hit this particular line, these tests have certainly hit it by now. All right, so we should have full coverage of all of that code. Let's talk about what to do next, because I think that checks the box. We need a visual distinction that tasks are complete versus incomplete. Done. And I do have a limited amount of time tonight, so I'm not sure actually how far we'll get into this next one, but we'll start on it. The next thing that I want to do is actually not this one. I was talking to my wife before I started the stream and I said, hey, look, what do you want me to work on? Which one of these are more important to you? And so she said, yep, this was number 1. Got to be able to show the difference. And the next thing that, because this distinction will be visible after this, it would be nice to get this projected state stuff. So now it's time to, I guess, come back to what did the old view have that this new view is missing now, and see how we can add that back in. So we're going to come back to this page. We're going to turn the flag back off. So the web server's still running. Let's turn the flag off so we can do the before and after. We'll disable it. And refresh this page. We should see the old view. So this is the old view. But we can also click in here and see progress for one of the students. I'll do that. And we'll do this to expand it. All right, so here is the thing that's missing. This column right here, planned completion. As my spouse is trying to figure out the school year, she's working through and determining, well, when is this likely to finish versus when is this likely to finish? And I had thought that, I naively thought when I first wrote this page that she only cared about the end date, because there is a part of this school year that has a report of when's everything supposed to be done. What are the last dates for the class? And so here's an example of 5/11 and 5/10 is the projected last dates based on what the student has already done. And that's useful, but that's not full enough. So she really needed to see this extra level of at the day-to-day task for an individual thing. So there's a couple of views for this. There's one view of how much has a student done. There's also what happens when there are no students. And so both of those are different aspects of projection. So for just the preliminary planning for the school year before any student is enrolled, it's important to be able to show how long is this going to take? How long will this go through the year? So this calculation right here, this planned completion stuff, it incorporates when have you set vacation days? When do you not do school during the week? So if you take off Saturday and Sunday, for example, which is very typical in most schools, at least in the US. I don't know how, I can't speak to all of the world, of course, but at least most schools are Monday through Friday, right? And it factors in all of that stuff to give accurate projections of you have this many tasks and it's projected to take you out this far. So we need to be able to show that on this page. It's not on this page, but we need to be able to add it. So let's turn the flag back on and see where it's going to go. And again, it's being kind of weird. Oh, this is the other page. There we go. So here we are. We have to do this in two different states, and this is the challenging part. It's like, how am I going to show this? I think when there are no students, what I want to show is just like this other version. Where'd it go? Have a column called planned completion, and it's going to show all the dates of here's if you were able to do the school year ideally, if you never had any hiccups or slowdowns or anything like that, here's when you would end. And that'll replace these columns and show that as planned completion. When there is a student, that gets a little harder. And I had a discussion with her of like, how do you want me to represent this? Because it's going to be a little strange. Like, I could, instead of having set date, I could have put a projected date here, but then it loses its visual clarity of what that means. And so what I think I concluded was it would be better to have a second row showing the projected date underneath it. So it's going to make all of the rows double in height by default. Which is, that is what it is. That's the best way to display it. And the challenge with that is like, there has to be, I can't just have like an extra column over here that says planned completion, because it can vary per student. In fact, you might have even, if you're super observant, which I wouldn't blame you if you weren't, I barely noticed it. Notice this is the same class. Both students are listed here, but it has different forecast dates, because when I was over setting the dates here, I marked different dates of when this was done. So I actually marked this one for the future, and so like she already completed this task, and so it affected the forecasting. So I can't have a single column, because imagine this in the extreme where one student has done half of the tasks, and for some reason the other student has done a quarter of the tasks. Then they're going to be very different projections. So we have to show all of the projections for each student, which is complex. It's more complex, but it's more accurate. So we're going to do that. We're going to include a second row that will go, it'll only show up on stuff that hasn't been completed yet. It doesn't make sense to show a projection on completed work. And it'll exist down here. And I think as an icon, I'm planning to use, I talked to her about what would be a good icon to use, and there's no perfect fit for this. There's no like show me the future icon, but the watch icon was a reasonable approximation. So that's what we're going to go for. Like I said, I don't think I have a lot of time. I probably have another 10 minutes to get started on this, but we're going to walk down this path, and I think to start, maybe we'll focus on, instead of having the completions for each student, actually maybe that's easier. Yeah, that's probably actually easier, because this current plan completion stuff is based on a student already. So there's some logic that calculates this, and we just need to call that logic twice. If you have, you need to call it n times for the number of enrolled students. Whereas the case where there's no student is actually some new case, I think, that I didn't anticipate, and probably don't have an actual forecasting for. So we're going to try and get it for one student, add that extra bit of data, and try and insert them into the rows here. And if we can do it for one, it should just do it for the second one. Yeah, Leo Resende, am I getting that close to right? Yeah, I think you're spot on. There's some level of Django waffle caching that I think happens, and I suspect it's because it is backed by a database table. But if Waffle is trying to cache it for a little bit, then the different workers might have different state. So yeah, it's a good observation. You're probably right. So we'll put some plan date stuff here. We'll use the watch icon and hopefully get something that matches up appropriately. I'm not sure how we'll blend the data into the actual task rows. That might be the challenge. Although if it's a forecast that spits out the dates, I just don't remember. I think I built a forecaster class, but I don't remember if it was meant to be iterated over or if it was meant to be queried by a date. I just don't recall. And we'll have to actually look. I think maybe the best starting place to go look is at the old view, because that's going to be the one that will show how I did this. Because I had to refactor it. I had to make this logic work for this page, but it also it was the same logic that's used for this page. So the way I built this page was kind of dumb in a sense of I cranked through all of the forecasting logic and then just pulled the last date. That's what's showing up here. So there is a forecaster class that builds some stuff, and I don't remember if it's a list or what it is. Where is it? Where did I put that thing? I think I even called it a forecaster. It's in the schools area. Okay. All right. Let's close the test case. Let's take a look at this. So the way this works is it takes a student and the course, and it provides this big list of tasks, and it's doing all the logic. So it's pretty self-contained for how to use it, which is nice. And it has all these edge cases that I'm not even describing and are not worth really talking too much about. We just know that we're going to take it on faith right now that this builds the right thing. It's just a matter of, can I use this appropriately after I've got the data out? And that's the trickier part, is that this tasks item is a list, but I need to convert it into a lookup table, I think. Let me think through this for a moment. I think that's going to be the way to go. So let's go to the students' views. We'll see where the forecaster is used. There's a forecaster right here, and it's past the things that it needs to calculate, and gets back this list, and then it cranks through that. Okay, so that's going to be kind of close to what we're looking for, but not quite the same. So actually, before I do this, I'm going to take what I've done already in homeschool and templates. This is the test code. This is the modifications that we just worked on. Turned out to be really simple. That's nice. It's only a handful of lines. I really like that. So we'll add that to the stage. And we'll also add the template code. I want to see, so we made one change on the template. It's crazy. Sometimes you get these changes down to something pretty minimal. So we'll add those two things to the stage. The other files that you can see there in my git status, don't worry about them. That was for other work that I just haven't committed. But this at least gives us a kind of a clean place for to hack on, to spike on this code change, and then know that if I've messed it up, I can just sort of back it out if there's a problem. So let's get up the course view. We're back at the detail view, or back at that function, I should say. And like I said, this thing goes through the tasks and does a bunch of lookup tables. In fact, this is probably the most accurate example of what we are looking for. Is I needed to do lookups of like grades and things to see if you have the right grade. But I didn't want to query the grades table every time it looped through every single task. So what I did was I took all of the grades and I put them in a data structure into a dictionary here that's actually like keyed by a student's ID, and I was able to get out if they had a grade or not. So it's going to be similar for asking what is the forecast date for the particular task for the particular student. Those two things, those two pieces of information need to go together. And where did the forecaster go? Oh, that's interesting. It's not even as simple as I would like it to be. So the items coming out of this needs a planned date attribute. That's the one that actually has when it's calculable. So the data structure isn't even super straightforward because it's complicated. It's like if the date might be coming from the coursework, it might be coming from something else. So this gets kind of brain bending. So I think what I'm going to do, because I really am, I have other things going on tonight, so I'm limited in time. So I'm going to put in some to-dos and basically set this up for the next stream. How about that? And then we'll call it. So what needs to happen? We need to set up a lookup table of forecast dates. All right, and then each so each task, well, we're considering the simplified case where you actually have students. So each task per student needs to pull the forecast date from the table. Then on the template side, we're going to render the forecast date if it's available in the student context. So those are the things that we're going to do on the next stream. Frankly, actually, we might not actually do them on the next stream. These are the things that I'm going to do. My spouse is looking for this stuff to be in there, so I might want to do this ahead of time, but we'll see. DJA Berthamix? I'm hoping I'm getting your handle somewhat close. You're new to Django. What's the best road trip you need? Are you asking, like, how do you get into it? Like, are resources for getting started? Is that kind of what you're looking for? Because if so, I have some suggestions, and it sort of depends on what your learning style is. If you like by doing, and I love by doing, and I think is a great way to learn, there are some hands-on ways to go. If you go to djangoproject.com, and then you go to the documentation section, there's actually going to be, here it is. It's right in my face and I'm looking right over it. There's a Django tutorial. the Django tutorial. So go to here, and this will walk you through, and it's pretty well documented. It'll walk you through the basics of Django. It's going to introduce you to the ORM, which is for models in the database. It'll walk you through views, which is how you run the Python code that extracts data from the database. It'll walk you through templates, which is how you render that stuff to actually write out the HTML to display to a web page. All of those things go in here. I'm trying to remember what else. Let's look back at this list. Oh yeah, I mean, you can see from the docs, it kind of lists out the parts. Oh, right. Talks about how to do web forms. So if you want to have users interact with your site and send you data and respond to data, that goes in there. Then it gets into more esoteric parts of Django. I'm not actually sure. Static files, I guess, is something that people should know early. I don't know. So the tutorial is pretty good. So that's one route. The other, there's another tutorial that there's an organization. It's called Django Girls, and they have a tutorial as well. And it's not specifically gendered or anything. They just have done a good job of putting a tutorial together. They, as an organization, try to help. They focus on women and those sort of things. But this is the tutorial you could use from them. And I honestly, I did not learn Django this way. This did not exist when I was learning Django, I believe. But I've heard good things about this tutorial. So that's another place you could go, is the Django Girls tutorial. And I lost the link for you for here's the Django project tutorial. If books are more your style, there's Learning Django. Is that it? Learning Django? Learn Django? Learn Django? Oh man. The person I'm trying to find is someone named Will Vincent. Will has a lot of good resources that are specific to Django, a bunch of different tutorials for different kinds of things. He has got some Django specific books that I think I've heard. Again, I have not actually read these myself, but I've heard really good things about them. So if you have funds to go buy a book, you could check out one of those. His content is usually very, very descriptive of here's how you would do this. So kind of holds your hand pretty well, I think. He has another site. I'm struggling to find where it is. I thought it was Learn Django, but maybe I'm misremembering the name of it now. Sorry, Will. I don't really remember at the moment. I also write a ton about Django. So if you want to check out my stuff, I have an entire series called Understand Django that I'm actually in progress of writing. It is not complete, but I have a lot of articles here. They are not short articles. They're meant to be pretty exhaustive on a topic. And I've structured it from a point of view, at least from my viewpoint, to say, like, you don't actually know how to program or do web stuff in general. What can you do to get into that? So it starts my pedagogy, I guess, in building this particular course series is different from the tutorial. The tutorial starts you down with the data. They start you at the base of dealing with the database. And my series starts you from the browser and works you down into the stuff. So explaining how URL routing works and understanding all the pieces, and slowly layers in more complexity as you go. So those are different ways that you might want to learn about Django. I take all of these streams, so if you want to, it's probably more advanced. But if you just want to stew in Django development, I do this stream and have done this stream for well over 2 years now, and I always get questions about where should I start because I have multiple projects. But starting at like stream number 39 on my YouTube channel is where I start this particular homeschool application. Before that, I had a different app going, and I would recommend starting from this application. The other one was a bit more involved and covered some really kind of deep corners of things. So that's where I would suggest going. What other resources are there? There's the Django Forum. The Django Forum is a group of folks that will answer Django questions. This is a discourse site. There's a good way to get your questions answered there. So if you have questions, obviously recognize that these people are volunteers. They're not going to do your project for you. And so you got to put in some of your own work, but this is a good place to go to. Other resources that I might suggest, I don't know. I feel like that's a pretty good list. Hopefully that kind of answers your question about where can you go. If you have any questions, I can hang on for another minute or two, but if you don't, I'm gonna wrap up. So let's revisit this. What did we do today? We made something visually distinct. We took a feature that was over in an old page that I'm trying to get rid of because it was a confusing page. And it wasn't confusing because the functionality on that page was confusing. It was confusing because there were 2 pages that were doing basically the same thing. Trying to understand your comment there. I'm just reading through it, just make sure I can see all of it. If you can make this. Oh, okay. Yeah. Good luck on that project. It sounds like interesting stuff. Like there's probably people that could benefit from that kind of stuff. It certainly would help. I guess if there was a piece of advice that I would have for you is make sure you, before you commit to a big project, and I'm not trying to dissuade you from doing a big project, of course, but before you do that, try something small, something very, very well scoped of, can I make pages? Can I get views together? Can I render something? Can I make a form? Can I just go through the motions of getting an app going? Because I think that will help. I'm also a big fan of having projects and going after the stuff that is important to you, because I think that is a fantastic way to have the motivation. Because a lot of people, what context should I add? So I am a meetup organizer in my town. So I run the Python meetup here in Frederick. And prior to COVID-19, we met every month, and I would meet all sorts of people who were wanting to get into Python, wanting to get into web development, and they would say, how do you do it? What can I do? And the bit of advice that I would give was pretty consistent, is that find a project that you care about. And it sounds like you have one, which is cool. And the reason that is actually to your benefit to have a project is you are going to absolutely run into walls, run into barriers that are going to be hard, whether it's like conceptually or just technically difficult. And having a project that you're trying to make available to people and getting real users to use is the motivation, at least in my experience, is the motivation to get you over and continue on. Because if you do it purely from an academic point of view, just to say, hey, I just want to learn this thing, then as soon as it gets hard, where's your motivation to keep going? I think a lot of people at that point just say, yeah, it doesn't matter. I'm not really doing anything with this, so I'm just going to stop. And so I think that's great. If you're working on a school management project, and where students or parents can check out their kids' marks and stuff, that sounds cool. Try that out and see how it goes. I'm sure you'll learn a ton. All right, so we are working on combining this page for this homeschool application, and we're extracting little pieces out of the old page, putting them into the new page. Where this needs to go now is to get more advanced. And this is the tricky part about working on this app, is one of the things that I pitch for school desks in particular. and I'll show you right on the main marketing page that I have for the site, is the headline feature of this particular application is that it's meant to be simple. I'm out there actively reviewing a lot of the competitors in the space, and these tools in this space get really complicated. So how maintaining that simplicity is paramount for what this application needs to be in order to succeed with the market that I'm going after. People who have tried other tools and have complained that they are too hard. And so that means that this view that I'm working on, this course page, needs to be really, it can't be an airplane cockpit. It can't have too many knobs and buttons and toggles and widgets and features. It needs to be very clear. And so that's what I'm trying to balance here of this. I need to actually put in a ton of actual like user experience design and product thinking to make a simple experience and hide the complexity and let the application do the heavy lifting, so that what comes out the other side when a user is using this is it just feels natural. That's an iterative process where I put the features in there and I get customer feedback and say, hey, does this actually make sense? Do you like this? Is it simple enough? What can I get rid of? What's not working? What's confusing? That's why I'm combining these pages. It's like it was already starting to get into that trap of being too complex. So that's why I'm doing this whole project, and that's where we'll go in the future. I don't know if next week I will be still on this particular page trying to refine this, or if we'll be moving on to something else, but I have a lot of other stuff to go into. I do want to thank you all for joining in this stream tonight. I do take this content and I post it to YouTube. So if there's anything you missed that you want to go back and check, you can go find me. I'm Matt Lehman on YouTube, and I'm pretty easy to find. And if you're over there, you can give me a thumbs up or subscribe. That really would help. Help me a lot anyway. Oh, you did some awesome work here, Leo Rosende. Oh, cool. Yeah, I need to go read that. I'm going to take that link and go read it after the stream, because that sounds like it might be explaining what was going on with the behavior, some caching or something. So I appreciate that. So thank you all again for tuning in. Go check out that stuff. If you haven't subscribed here on Twitch, or what is it, follow on Twitch? I never get those straight. Please do that. And I hope you have a great evening. Until then, I'll see you next week. Take care.